Forget the paradoxes. Forget the timelines. If you ever invent or acquire a time machine, I only have one warning for you. It's not about what you change in the past. It's about what you eat. Imagine for a moment that you've just snapped through centuries in the blink of an eye. You're the traveler, but instead of crossing borders, you've crossed epochs. You are, without question, starving. And the first thing you'll do upon arrival is seek out a place to eat. That, my friends, is the moment your time travel adventure could become a horrifying final meal. This is why you must pay close attention to the following instructions if, for instance, you happen to travel back to the American state of Maryland in the autumn of 1996, and your journey lands you in a small northern town called Point Boulevard. Listen carefully. As you take the highway leading into that area, drive only about 500 meters into town. On the right-hand side, you will find a small, greasy burger stand. It is operated by an absolute giant of a man, nearly 2 meters tall, weighing well over 200 kilograms, completely bald, and covered in intricate tattoos that seem to crawl across his massive frame. He's usually busy. You'll likely see a small, unwitting crowd waiting as the man does frighteningly good business. This is the crucial, life-saving part. Do yourself a favor, and under no circumstances should you ever eat from that stand. Why? Because the pork he uses in those popular cheap burgers is mixed with human flesh. Now, try to picture the man who runs that stand. Despite his imposing size and fearsome appearance, before he started his horrific burger business, he was actually profoundly shy and deeply introverted. Everyone used to mock him because of his size and unusual looks. They called him a monster, a freak. Yet despite all the cruelty he endured, he never once thought about hurting anyone. He eventually married his sweetheart, whom he loved deeply, and they had a son. However, when his boy turned 6, something happened that completely shattered his life and burned his heart from the inside out. This event transformed him from Yers Hordra, Gentle Joe the Bear, the soft nickname his few friends used, into a man who would become known across the world as the Cannibal. In a moment, we will formally introduce the man behind the nickname, Joseph Roy Metheny. We will finally uncover the harrowing secret behind his moniker as perhaps the most dangerous and disturbing serial killer in United States history. Joseph Roy Metheny was born on February 3, 1955, in Baltimore, Maryland. He was the youngest of 6 brothers, and his family, father, mother, and all 6 boys, lived cramped in a small house barely suited for 4. Seeking a bit more space, the family eventually decided to move to a larger house in the northern town of Point Boulevard. This, of course, is the very location I mentioned at the beginning. The town Joseph would never leave. He would, in fact, make it his personal hunting ground. And you'll soon understand why. Shortly after their move, their circumstances widened in a tragic way. Joseph's father was killed after being hit by a car. This left his mother alone with 6 boys, the oldest barely 16, facing harsh conditions with no support system other than herself. Joseph was only 6 years old at the time, a number I urge you to remember, as it seems to be cursed in his life. His father's death profoundly affected him. The boy instantly withdrew, becoming quiet and interacting less and less with his siblings. He underwent psychiatric treatment, but his condition didn't significantly improve. While he could communicate, he struggled to connect with people appropriately. Adding to his burden was the relentless bullying he faced. They mocked him incessantly for his excess weight and his disproportionately large size for his age. His family and close friends affectionately called him Gentle Joe the Bear. But others had no kindness. He was subjected to a barrage of cruel names: the Blob of Stupidity, Polar Bear, and the Ugly Beast. Yet, despite all this, he never reacted aggressively. On the contrary, he was always kind and friendly, never letting anyone see how much they bothered him. Pay close attention to this almost angelic, gentle demeanor, because it is the exact opposite of the monster that is about to claw its way out. Joe continued like this until he turned 18 and entered the military for a 2-year compulsory service. When he returned, however, he was no longer Gentle Joe. This is where the real dark story of Joe Metheny begins. His very first move was to cut ties, abandoning his family and striking out on his own. Where he went didn't matter. All that mattered was getting away from the trauma of his old life. Almost immediately, he found work at a busy local burger restaurant and dedicated himself to learning the trade. He spent all his time there, working and often sleeping on the premises. He mastered the blending of spices, the gruesome grinding and cutting of meat, and the cooking process itself. The owner taught him everything, and Joe quickly became a talented cook. He learned a signature blend of spices and a cooking method that could make any meat taste fantastic. It was as if the owner unknowingly armed Joe with a tool that would, in a few years, allow him to successfully mask a flavor that no palate should ever taste. During this time, Joe also fell in with an unusual and strange crowd, a group of severe addicts who dabbled in every illicit substance available. He'd work the grill during the day, and at night, he'd join his friends in dark, abandoned houses, partying and drinking until sunrise, consuming anything that could alter their state of mind. Their only goal was to completely escape sobriety. This destructive lifestyle eventually led to Joe being fired from his job. He became homeless, sleeping under bridges or in the derelict houses where he partied. It was in this perfect storm of darkness, drinking, drugs, and utter despair, and far removed from any traditional courtship, that Joe fell in love. He met a woman named Katie, whom he viewed as a beacon of virtue compared to the abysmal life he was living. Just 1 month after they met, Joe and Katie were married. And for a brief time, Joe felt a powerful, stabilizing weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This new sense of duty pushed him to move from one job to another, though he always stayed within the confines of Point Boulevard through it all. Despite the life of late-night partying, drinking, and heavy drug use, Joe remained a fundamentally kind and well-liked man. He was never dangerous. In fact, people often sought him out and offered him work. He was genuinely gentle and helped those around him. Then came the greatest joy of his life: the birth of his son, whom he named Roy, after his own late father. Joe always spoke of waiting for this moment to honor the man who, despite dying when Joe was a boy, had the single greatest impact on him. Joe poured all the love and emotional fulfillment he had ever craved into his son, who became the most precious thing in the world. He loved Roy fiercely and constantly said his son was the only reason he kept going in life. This fragile, beautiful peace held until Roy turned 6 years old. The number 6 had returned, not as a coincidence, but as a devastating curse. At the time, Joe was working as a long-haul truck driver. One day, he departed for a trip that would take him away from home for 2 days. When Joe returned on the 3rd day, it was July 1994. He found the house chillingly, completely empty. He searched frantically for his wife and son, but they were nowhere to be found. He soon discovered the devastating, soul-crushing truth. His wife, Katie, had taken their son, all his hard-earned savings, and every important possession, and had fled with her lover to a place that remains unknown to this very day. The feeling that he had lost his son forever triggered an hysterical, apocalyptic fit of rage in Joe. He ran into the street, screaming and weeping, searching everywhere he thought his wife might be. He later recounted that, unconsciously, he kept revisiting places they had shared, until he finally ended up beneath the very bridge where they used to do drugs together. The dark birthplace of their relationship. When he looked and didn't find her, a voice deep inside told him that everything was truly, hopelessly over. From that devastating moment on, the chapter titled Gentle Joe the Bear was violently slammed shut. A new chapter began, one fittingly titled The Cannibal, the story of perhaps the most dangerous serial killer in U.S. history. Under the bridge, the very moment Joe realized his life could never be the same, he screamed and collapsed into a fit of uncontrolled sobbing. He had lost his father at 6, and now he had lost his son at 6. The past trauma had perfectly aligned with the present loss. At that time, he saw 2 homeless people in their 30s sitting nearby, high on drugs beneath the same bridge. These 2 became the gateway, the first victims on the dark path Joe took. Near where Joe was standing, there were old metal bars lying on the ground, rusty, heavy, and perfect. He grabbed one and, without a word, charged at the pair. Though the men were drunk and barely conscious, Joe's terrifying appearance as he lunged towards them jolted them awake, and they began to scream. Joe's rage was a physical force. After a relentless, horrifying 15-minute beating, both men were dead. When Joe fully registered the sickening wetness of what he had done, he snapped back to a chilling awareness and instantly decided to flee the scene. However, just as he was about to run, he spotted a third man standing far away on the riverbank. Joe immediately assumed this man had witnessed the entire brutal act. The thought of a witness, the thought of being caught, fueled the last dregs of his adrenaline. Seeing him as an inevitable loose end, Joe charged and killed him too, silencing the area beneath the bridge forever. After the third murder, he fled. Sometime later, based on ongoing investigations and suspicions, the police arrested Joe. Despite the gravity of the crimes, he was released after only 18 months due to insufficient evidence. Joe left prison and immediately went to live in an abandoned trailer on the outskirts of town. Every day, he would return to the town entrance and wait. Convinced his wife would eventually return and give him his son back by day, he waited for Roy. By night, he consumed drugs. Then, one day, he made a decision. He would take revenge on his wife, even though he didn't know where she was. The realization hit him that his wife was a prostitute, and therefore, he vowed to kill anyone who resembled her or reminded him of her. Better late than never, he thought, realizing the true nature of the woman he married. This terrible resolution was cemented after he encountered a woman named Kathy, aged 45, who bore a striking resemblance to his wife. Kathy was with her friend Kimberly, aged 23. Joe met them both in 1996, right around the time he had found work again at a burger restaurant near the town. The very year and place mentioned at the start of our story. They frequented the restaurant because his cooking was genuinely good. The poor women had no idea what fate awaited them. The relationship quickly developed, and soon, Kathy and Kimberly were visiting Joe at his abandoned trailer every day to do drugs together. Then, one evening, after Joe had consumed a massive amount of narcotics and without any discernible trigger, he snapped. Driven by the singular thought that Kathy resembled his cheating wife, he grabbed a knife and began stabbing. He plunged the knife into Kathy's neck 3 times, killing her instantly. Kimberly resisted fiercely, but she ultimately succumbed after receiving more than 16 stab wounds. Once they were dead, Joe sat beside the bodies, desperately trying to figure out how to escape the predicament he was in. Taking the same knife, he meticulously dismembered the corpses and packed them into plastic bags. He then stored the bags in a refrigerator, deciding to keep them until he figured out what to do next. The very next day, Joe was at work seasoning meat when a profitable business idea flashed into his mind. He thought, "I have the meat, I have the spices, and I'm a master at making burgers. Why don't I open my own stand and profit from my experience and skills?" He stole some pork and spice containers from the restaurant and returned to his trailer. He pulled the bags out of the fridge, began meticulously cutting up the victim's flesh, and mixed it with the pork, adding a generous amount of spices. The following day, he set up his cart and started selling. Indeed, no one detected the taste. No one suspected they were eating human flesh. His burgers became so popular that he developed a loyal clientele, especially among the truck drivers passing near the town who went out of their way to stop for his delicious burgers. Within 3 days, he sold every scrap of the meat he had. At that moment, Joe understood the severity of his situation. The disaster, however, wasn't that he had killed and sold human flesh. The disaster was that he had run out of meat. People loved the blend, and that blend demanded human flesh. He had to act. Despite all this, believe it or not, Joe still had some shred of conscience left. He reasoned, "Okay, I need to kill people to get my meat, but I won't kill just anyone." After careful thought, the man developed a plan. He decided he wouldn't kill randomly, no matter. Instead, he resolved to murder only prostitutes. Firstly, this was his act of revenge against his wife. And secondly, it would keep his profitable business running. He also established strict criteria for his victims. For instance, the woman had to be a stranger to the town and have no formal ties to anyone there. She couldn't work at any local nightclub, ensuring no one would immediately ask questions about her disappearance. His top priority, however, was always immigrant women smuggled into the country. These victims often had no official paperwork and no one to report them missing. And finally, anyone who resembled his wife, regardless of whether they were a prostitute or not, was also a mandatory target for elimination. Among the many people Joe killed was a young Mexican immigrant who had entered the U.S. illegally. The strange thing was, this young man actually approached Joe at his burger cart. Joe struck up a conversation and learned the man had only arrived in town a few days prior. It was as if fate itself had delivered the victim to his destiny. Joe gave him a free burger and convinced him to come back to the trailer. Once there, he killed, butchered, and seasoned him. Joe continued this operation for nearly a year. On more than one occasion, he sold pure human flesh, not mixed with any other meat at all. During this time, he murdered more than 27 people, 14 of whom were prostitutes. He always returned to the bridge where he committed his first murders. That area was filled with homeless, transient individuals whom nobody knew or looked for. Since many of them were addicted to drugs, it was easy for Joe to persuade them to come back to his trailer. Every source confirms that Joe did not lure his victims for sex or for his own entertainment. His sole motivation was murder, specifically to secure his meat supply. His gruesome routine continued until the day he brought back a prostitute named Rita. What Joe didn't know was that Rita was a trained ballet dancer and gymnast. The moment they entered the trailer and he grabbed his knife and approached her, she fought back. Rita managed to resist his massive strength and escape from the trailer. Seeing her flee, Joe chased after her like a madman. If he didn't catch her, his entire horrifying operation would be exposed. The bizarre part is that Rita managed to scale a 3-meter-high fence and successfully escape. The first place she ran was the police station. In less than an hour, Joe was arrested. When the police captured him, Joe did not resist or try to conceal anything. He told them everything they wanted to know in gruesome detail. He led the police to the spots where he had been burying his victims, a sight that revealed more than 14 severed heads. As the heads were unusable for his burgers, he confessed to every crime. What finally broke his silence was the realization that he had completely lost hope of his son ever returning. He knew he could no longer wait at the town entrance, and life simply meant nothing to him anymore. After confessing to his string of atrocities, he was initially sentenced to death. However, because he was under the influence of drugs during the commission of all his crimes, his sentence was commuted to solitary confinement for life. As those familiar with the law know, this sentence is often considered 1,000 times worse than execution. Imagine, Joe remained in his cell from 1998 until 2017. On August 5th, 2017, at lunchtime, a guard came to deliver his meal and found him lying on the floor. Joe Metheny was pronounced dead at the age of 62, and so ends the chilling story of Joseph Metheny, the most dangerous serial killer the United States has ever known. And so, we arrive at the conclusion of this tragedy. I sincerely hope that today's journey resonated deeply with you. For the stories of criminals are not merely records of conviction, but complicated human labyrinths. I urge you to share your thoughts in the comments. Were you able to fully condemn him? Or did your heart flicker with a touch of pity? As for me, I confess I am lost in this darkness. My own feelings are shattered ruins. How can one possibly separate the horrific crime from the soul of a child that was crushed? How do we weigh the brutality of the act against everything he endured? The vicious bullying, grinding poverty, the shock of early bereavement, and the ultimate devastating blow, his wife's flight, tearing away a piece of his own soul. His son? This is unbearable. What would you have done if you were in his place? I truly don't know. I simply don't know. If you are interested in exploring more shadowy corners of these complex human souls, please follow the channel and hit the notification bell. We will meet again for our next story.